Tonight, we're going to travel together, not just through time, but through one of the most fascinating and mysterious stories from the ancient world. A story about power and pride, about faith and fear, about a woman who became one of history's most talked about queens. But before we begin, let me tell you what makes tonight's story special. This isn't just history. This is a tale filled with golden palaces and stormy seas, with prophets who spoke to the sky and queens who tried to silence them. It's about choices that changed kingdoms and words that echoed through generations. And here's something interesting to think about as we go along. What makes someone a hero in one story and a villain in another? Can we truly understand someone's choices without walking in their world? Keep that question in your mind. We'll explore it together. Now, I want you to get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Pull your blanket a little closer. Let your shoulders relax. Take a slow, deep breath in and let it out. Good. Tonight's journey will take us about 2 hours. That's perfect timing for your mind to slowly unwind, for the day's worries to fade away, and for sleep to find you naturally whenever you're ready. There's no rush, no pressure, just a story, told at a pace that lets you drift comfortably between listening and dreaming. Some parts of our story will surprise you. Other moments will make you wonder. And throughout our time together, I'll be here, guiding you gently through each chapter, each scene, each moment. So let's begin our journey. Close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them softly open. Either way is perfect. We're going back in time now, traveling across centuries, across deserts and seas, to a world very different from ours, yet surprisingly similar in the hearts of the people who lived there. Are you ready? Then let me take you to the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, to the year 900 BC, where purple fabric worth more than gold was made, where ships sailed to the edges of the known world, and where our story truly begins. Before we dive in, if you enjoy stories like this one, stories that help you relax and take you to fascinating places in history, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. We create content just like this several times a week, all designed to help you unwind and learn something interesting at the same time. And now, let's step into the world of ancient Phoenicia. Chapter 1. The Purple City by the Sea. Imagine standing on a harbor dock as the sun rises over the Mediterranean Sea. The water stretches endlessly before you, sparkling like a million diamonds scattered across blue silk. The air smells of salt and fish, of spices from distant lands, and of something else, a rich, almost mysterious scent that seems to cling to everything. That scent is purple. Not just any purple, but Phoenician purple, the most expensive color in the ancient world. It came from tiny sea snails, thousands of them crushed to make just enough dye for a single royal robe. Emperors would pay fortunes for it. Kings would wage wars to control it. And here, in the great cities of Tyre and Sidon, this purple was made. Welcome to Phoenicia, around the year 900 BC. These weren't just cities, they were wonders. Imagine busy ports where ships from Egypt, Greece, and mysterious lands beyond the horizon brought treasures from across the world. Picture marketplaces filled with merchants shouting in a dozen different languages, selling gold from Africa, incense from Arabia, spices from India, and silver from Spain. The Phoenicians were the masters of the sea. While other peoples stayed close to their shores, afraid of the deep waters, the Phoenicians sailed boldly into the unknown. They created the alphabet that would eventually become the letters you're reading now. They built ships that could weather any storm. They established trading posts that became great cities across the Mediterranean. But among all their cities, two stood tallest: Tyre and Sidon. Sidon was older, grander, richer. Its walls rose high above the coastline, white limestone that gleamed in the sunshine. Inside those walls, narrow streets wound between tall buildings, creating cool shadows where merchants set up their stalls. Fountains bubbled in courtyards, gardens grew on rooftops, and everywhere, absolutely everywhere, there was wealth. But there was something else too. In the center of the city, rising above even the palace, stood the temples. Great structures of carved stone and cedar wood, with columns as thick as 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder. These temples weren't dedicated to one god, but to many. The greatest among them was Baal, the storm god, the one they believed brought rain to the crops and power to the kings. His statue stood tall in the main temple, arms outstretched, face stern and demanding. And beside him, in an equally impressive temple, stood Astarte, the goddess of fertility, love, and war. Her image was beautiful and terrible at once, promising both life and death, pleasure and sacrifice. These weren't just places of quiet prayer. The temples were the beating heart of Phoenician life. Festivals filled their courtyards. Processions wound through the streets. Priests in elaborate robes performed rituals that had been passed down for generations. And it was here, in Sidon, that politics and religion mixed together like wine and water, impossible to separate. The king didn't just rule the people, he guided their spirits. He interpreted the will of the gods. He decided which rituals would be performed and when. Think about that for a moment. Imagine living in a place where your king wasn't just your political leader, but also your spiritual guide. Where the palace and the temple were really one and the same, where every decision about trade routes or peace treaties was also a decision about the gods. This was Sidon. And in this city of purple fabric and golden temples, where merchant ships brought treasures from the ends of the earth, and where the gods seemed to speak through every ritual and every sacrifice, something was about to change. Someone was about to rise to power who would reshape not just Sidon, but the entire region. His name was Ethbaal, and to understand the story of Jezebel, we must first understand him, because he made her into what she would become. But that's a story for our next chapter. For now, just hold this picture in your mind. The city by the sea, the purple fabrics fluttering in the breeze, the temples rising toward the sky, and the smell of incense mixing with salt air. Can you see it? Keep breathing slowly. Let the image settle in your mind. And when you're ready, we'll meet the man who would change everything. Chapter 2. A princess unlike any other. Now, let's talk about ambition. What drives someone to reach for more than they have? What makes a person look at power and decide they must have it, no matter the cost? Ethbaal knew ambition well. It burned inside him like a fire that could never be satisfied. He hadn't been born to be king. No, Ethbaal's path to the throne was much more interesting than simple inheritance. You see, before he became king, he was a priest, a high priest of Astarte, to be exact. Imagine him in his younger years, a man who knew the sacred texts by heart, who could perform the most complex rituals without a single mistake, who understood the deep mysteries that ordinary people never glimpsed. He stood before crowds during festivals, his voice ringing out across the temple courtyards, speaking words that people believed came directly from the goddess herself. But for Ethbaal, that wasn't enough. He would stand at the altar, performing sacrifices, watching the smoke rise toward the sky, and his eyes would drift toward the palace visible through the temple columns. He could see the king's guards, the royal banners, the messengers running back and forth with important news. And he wanted that. All of it. The ancient records don't tell us exactly how it happened. They simply say that Ethbaal killed Felis and took the throne. Just like that. A few words to describe what must have been a dramatic, violent moment that changed everything. Perhaps it was a sudden attack during a ceremony. Perhaps it was a carefully planned conspiracy. We'll never know for certain. But what we do know is this. Ethbaal succeeded. He went from standing at the altar to sitting on the throne. He became king of Sidon, one of the most powerful cities in the known world. And here's what makes this so important. He didn't stop being a priest when he became king. He merged both roles into one. He was now both political ruler and spiritual leader, the voice of the gods and the commander of armies, the one who decided both where ships would sail and how gods would be worshipped. Think about the power that gave him. Complete control over both body and soul, over both the physical kingdom and the spiritual lives of his people. Under his rule, Sidon became even more devoted to Baal and Astarte. New temples were built, festivals became more elaborate, the rituals grew more intense, more demanding, sometimes darker. And it was during this time, when Ethbaal's power was at its peak, that a daughter was born to him. He looked at this infant girl, this tiny princess, wrapped in the finest purple linens, and he named her Jezabel. Now, names meant something in the ancient world. They weren't just sounds parents liked. They carried meaning, destiny, purpose. Some scholars say Jezebel means, "Where is the prince?" An ancient ritual question used in temple ceremonies, calling out for the god to appear. Others suggest it means exalted by Baal or Baal's princess. Whatever the exact translation, one thing was clear. This was not an ordinary name for an ordinary girl. Ethbaal had plans for his daughter. From her very first days, Jezebel grew up surrounded by power. Her nursery was in the palace, but her education took place in the temples. While other royal children learned to play instruments or embroider, Jezebel learned the sacred chants. While others played games, she watched sacrifices. Her father made sure she understood everything. He taught her himself, this priest king, sharing secrets that were usually kept from women and children. She learned how to read omens in the patterns of smoke rising from altars. She memorized the prayers that priests spoke at dawn. She studied the movements of stars and how they supposedly influenced human fate. She learned which herbs were sacred to which gods, which animals made acceptable sacrifices, which days were holy and which were cursed. But that wasn't all. Ethbaal also taught her about power itself, about how kingdoms work, about trade routes and alliances, about when to speak and when to remain silent, about how to read people's faces and know what they're thinking, about how to use words like weapons. Can you imagine being that young girl? Growing up in a world where temple incense was as common as fresh air, where the sounds of ritual drums were your lullabies, where the gods weren't distant mysteries but daily reality. As Jezebel grew older, something fascinating happened. She didn't just learn what her father taught, she exceeded it. She became more skilled, more knowledgeable, more compelling than anyone expected. By the time she was a teenager, priests twice her age would fall silent when she entered a room. When she spoke about the gods, people listened. When she performed rituals, crowds gathered just to watch her. There was something about her presence, something that commanded attention without demanding it. She was beautiful, yes. Ancient sources mention that. But beauty was common among royal women. What set Jezebel apart was something else: intelligence, confidence, and an absolute certainty that she was meant for greatness. She didn't walk through the palace corridors. She glided. She didn't speak to people. She addressed them. She didn't ask questions. She made observations that others hadn't considered. And here's something fascinating to think about. Was she naturally this way, or did her father create this in her? Did Baal shape her so completely that she became exactly what he intended? Or did she have something within her that even he couldn't fully control? Keep that question in mind. We'll return to it. By the time Jezebel reached marrying age, her reputation had spread beyond Sidon. Ambassadors from other kingdoms had seen her at state ceremonies. Merchants who visited Sidon returned home with stories about the priest-king's remarkable daughter. Her name was spoken in courts across the Mediterranean. She was learned. She was powerful. She was devoted to her gods. And her father, Baal, began to think about how he could use this extraordinary daughter to extend Sidon's influence even further. He began to think about an alliance with the kingdom to the south, a kingdom that was wealthy but unstable, a kingdom that needed what Phoenicia could offer and could provide what Phoenicia needed in return, a kingdom called Israel. And with that thought, the wheels of destiny began to turn. But I'm getting ahead of our story. Let's take a moment here to pause and breathe. Feel your body relaxing into wherever you're resting. Notice how your mind has traveled to this ancient world, to these marble halls and incense-filled temples. If you're finding this story interesting and relaxing, take a second to hit that like button. It helps other people find these stories too, and it lets me know you're enjoying the journey we're taking together. Now, let's continue. Because the stage is set, the players are ready, and something significant is about to happen. Chapter 3. When two kingdoms met. Have you ever wondered how one conversation can change the course of history? How a single meeting between two people can affect thousands of lives, reshape nations, and echo through centuries? That's what we're about to witness. Let's travel south now, away from the coastal cities of Phoenicia, inland to the hill country of Samaria. This is Israel, and it's a very different place from Sidon. Where Phoenicia was old and stable, Israel was relatively young and often troubled. Where Phoenician cities had stood for centuries, Israel was still defining itself, still figuring out what kind of nation it wanted to be. The king of Israel at this time was named Ahab. He was the son of Omri, who had been a strong, effective ruler. Omri had moved Israel's capital to Samaria and built it into an impressive city. He'd made peace treaties with neighboring kingdoms and strengthened Israel's military. Now Ahab sat on his father's throne, and he had big plans. He wanted to make Israel even stronger. He wanted to secure trade routes to the Mediterranean. He wanted access to those Phoenician ships that could carry Israeli goods to markets across the sea. He wanted the wealth that came from international trade, and he knew exactly who could give him all of that: Baal of Sidon. So one spring morning, when the roads were dry and travel was easy, Ahab assembled a royal caravan. Chariots, guards, servants, officials, and gifts. Lots of gifts. Gold, silver, olive oil, grain, fine wool. He brought samples of everything Israel produced that Phoenicia might want. And he set out northward, toward the coast, toward Sidon. Imagine that journey, leaving the hills of Samaria, passing through valleys where shepherds watch their flocks, traveling through villages where people stopped their work to watch the royal procession pass by. Gradually, the landscape changed. The hills gave way to coastal plains. And finally, there it was, the Mediterranean Sea, vast and blue, stretching to the horizon. And rising beside it, the white walls of Sidon. The city was more magnificent than anything Ahab had seen. Taller buildings, wider streets, more colors, more sounds, more life packed into one place than anywhere in Israel. When the gates opened to receive him, Ahab found himself in a different world. Musicians played instruments he'd never heard before. Dancers moved in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. The streets were lined with people wearing clothes in shades of purple and blue that shouldn't exist in nature. The smell of incense was everywhere, thick and sweet and slightly overwhelming. And watching it all from the palace balcony, Baal waited. The two kings met in the great hall of Sidon's palace. This wasn't like Ahab's throne room back in Samaria. This hall was enormous, with columns carved to look like trees holding up the ceiling. Lamps burned with scented oils. Tapestries showed scenes of gods and goddesses in moments of power and judgment. Ahab suddenly felt very aware that he was in someone else's domain. But Baal was gracious. He welcomed the young king warmly. They sat together, not on formal thrones, but on comfortable couches, while servants brought wine and honey cakes. They talked about their fathers, about trade, about the state of the world. For 3 days, they negotiated. Maps were spread across tables. Trade officials from both kingdoms listed what they could offer. Israel had grain, olive oil, wool, and agricultural products. Phoenicia had cedar wood, purple dye, metalwork, ships, and access to Mediterranean trade routes. It was a perfect match. Each kingdom had exactly what the other needed. The officials drew up agreements. They calculated tariffs and trade volumes. They planned shipping schedules and caravan routes. It all made perfect sense economically. But on the 4th day, during a private banquet in one of the palace gardens, Baal brought up something new. They were alone, except for a few servants, sitting in a courtyard where a fountain bubbled and date palms swayed in the evening breeze. The sun was setting over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Baal poured more wine for both of them and spoke in a thoughtful voice. "King Ahab," he said, "our agreement is good. Our kingdoms will both prosper from this trade. But treaties written on papyrus can be broken. Agreements signed with seals can be forgotten when new kings take our thrones." Ahab nodded slowly, wondering where this was leading. "If we want this alliance to last," Baal continued, "it needs to be deeper than documents. It needs to be sealed with family bonds, with marriage. There was a pause. A bird called somewhere in the garden. I have a daughter, Ethbaal said. Her name is Jezebel. She's learned, skilled in both matters of state and matters of faith. She would make a worthy queen for Israel. Marry her, and our kingdoms will be bound together in a way that no treaty can match. Ahab sat very still. He'd known this might be coming. Marriage alliances were common among kings. But this wasn't just any marriage. This was bringing a Phoenician princess, raised in the worship of Baal and Astarte, to become queen of Israel. Israel, which worshipped Yahweh. Israel, which had prophets who spoke fierce words against serving other gods. Israel, which had a very different spiritual foundation than Phoenicia. Let me think about this, Ahab said carefully. Let me consult with my advisors. This is a significant decision. That night, in the rooms provided for him in the palace, Ahab called his closest advisors together. The discussion was intense. Some advisors were immediately in favor. Think of the trade benefits, they said. Think of the alliance with the most powerful coastal kingdom. This marriage would secure everything we've been negotiating and more. Others were hesitant. The prophets won't like this, one pointed out. Especially Elijah. He's already spoken against serving foreign gods. What will he say when we bring a priestess of Baal into the royal palace? Does it matter what one prophet thinks? Another advisor countered. The king rules Israel, not the prophets. We need to think about practical matters, peace, prosperity, stability. This marriage gives us all of that. Ahab listened to all sides. He weighed the benefits and the costs, and in the end, he made his choice. The next morning, he found Ethbaal in the throne room and spoke clearly. I accept your offer. I will marry Jezebel. Let our kingdoms be joined as family. Ethbaal smiled. Not a broad grin, but a small, satisfied smile, as if he'd expected this answer all along. Then let me call my daughter, he said. It's time you met. The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Jezebel entered. She wore a dress of deep blue linen with gold thread woven through it in patterns that caught the light. Her hair was arranged in elaborate braids, held in place with small gold clasps. She wore bracelets on her wrists and a necklace of precious stones. But what struck Ahab most wasn't her clothing or jewelry. It was the way she moved, completely confident, completely composed. She didn't look nervous or shy or uncertain. She looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. She walked the length of that great hall while everyone watched, and she never dropped her gaze. When she reached the platform where Ahab and her father stood, she bowed, not deeply, but with respectful acknowledgement. My Lord King, she said, her voice clear and musical. My father tells me you do us the honor of seeking alliance with our house. The honor is mine, Ahab replied, and meant it. Up close, he could see her eyes, dark, intelligent, measuring. She was looking at him the same way he was looking at her, trying to understand what kind of person stood before her, what this alliance would really mean. May I speak freely? Jezebel asked. Ahab glanced at Ethbaal, who nodded slightly. Of course, Ahab said. I'm not just a woman to bear you children, Jezebel said calmly. I'm my father's daughter, trained in matters of state and faith. If I come to Samaria as your queen, I will bring my knowledge, my gods, and my ways. Can you accept that? There was silence in the hall. It was an unusual question. Most royal brides didn't negotiate terms. But then, Jezebel clearly wasn't most royal brides. Ahab considered for a moment. Then he said, "I seek a queen who can rule beside me, not behind me. Bring your knowledge. We'll find a place for your devotions. Together, we'll make Israel strong." Jezebel studied his face, then nodded once. "Then we have an agreement." And just like that, it was decided. The formal engagement ceremony took place that afternoon. Contracts were signed, gifts were exchanged. Priests from both kingdoms offered blessings, though interestingly, they blessed the couple in different names to different gods. As the sun set on Sidon that evening, the biggest question wasn't whether the marriage would happen. It was what would happen when Jezebel arrived in Samaria. How would Israel receive this foreign queen? What would the prophets say? How would the people react? And most importantly, what would Jezebel do with the power she was about to receive? Interesting questions, aren't they? Before we find out the answers, let me ask you, if you're enjoying this journey through history, would you share this video with a friend or family member who might also enjoy it? These stories are meant to be shared, and your support helps this channel grow. Now let's continue, because Jezebel is about to enter Israel, and nothing will ever be quite the same. Chapter 4. The New Queen of Samaria. The journey from Sidon to Samaria took several days. Imagine that caravan, Ahab's chariots leading the way, then Jezebel's traveling platform, covered with curtains to shield her from the sun and dust. Behind her came wagons loaded with her possessions, trunks of clothing, chests of jewelry, crates of books and scrolls. But there was something else in that caravan that would prove even more significant than any physical belongings. Priests, Phoenician priests of Baal and Astarte, temple musicians, sacred vessels, images of the gods, carefully wrapped and transported, incense from Sidon's temples. Everything needed to establish proper worship in a new place. Jezebel wasn't just moving to a new home. She was bringing her entire religious world with her. As the caravan traveled south, leaving the coast and climbing into the hill country, the landscape changed. The lush green coastal plains gave way to rockier terrain. Villages became smaller, more spread out. The people looked different too. Simpler clothes, harder hands from working in fields and vineyards. This was Israel. Jezebel watched it all through the curtains of her traveling platform, studying the land she would now call home. When the walls of Samaria finally came into view, word had already spread throughout the city. A crowd had gathered at the gates. Thousands of people wanted to see their new queen, this foreign princess everyone had been talking about. As Jezebel's platform passed through the gates, people pressed forward to get a glimpse. Some cheered, some simply stared. Others whispered to their neighbors, uncertain what to make of this exotic stranger who would now be their queen. The palace in Samaria wasn't as large as the one in Sidon, but it was impressive in its own way. Built of white limestone, it gleamed in the sunshine. The throne room had been prepared for a formal reception. Banners hung from the walls, lamps were lit, and the entire court had assembled. Ahab stood before his throne, waiting. When Jezebel entered, flanked by her Phoenician attendants, a murmur rippled through the crowd. She was even more striking than the rumors had suggested. She moved with absolute confidence, her head high, her expression serene. Ahab stepped forward and took her hand. "People of Israel," he announced, "I present to you Jezebel of Sidon, who from this day forward will be your queen. Through her, we are joined with Phoenicia in an alliance that will bring prosperity to our kingdom." Most of the court applauded, but not everyone. Near the back of the crowd, a disturbance began. People turned to look. The crowd parted reluctantly. And through that gap walked a man dressed completely differently from everyone else in that palace. While the courtiers wore fine linens and colorful robes, this man wore rough camel hair held together with a leather belt. His feet were dusty from the road. His hair was wild. But his eyes burned with an intensity that made people step back. Everyone knew who he was. Elijah, the prophet of Yahweh. He walked straight toward the platform where Ahab and Jezebel stood, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of that silent hall. "King of Israel," Elijah said, not shouting but somehow loud anyway. "Is this what you do? You join your house with those who serve Baal. You bring foreign gods into Yahweh's land." Ahab's jaw tightened. "Elijah, I seek peace and prosperity for Israel. This alliance will strengthen our nation. This alliance will bring judgment," Elijah replied. "Yahweh gave you this throne. He raised your father up. He made you king. And now you turn to other gods?" "I turn to no one," Ahab said, his voice rising. "I seek what's best for my people." "As Yahweh lives," Elijah declared, "this decision will bring consequences upon your house. You open the door to idolatry, and suffering will follow." For a long moment, the prophet and the king stared at each other. The entire court held its breath. Then Jezebel spoke for the first time since entering the hall. Her voice was calm, almost curious. "Who is this man who speaks to you so boldly in your own palace?" "His name is Elijah," Ahab said quietly. "He's a prophet of Yahweh, the God of Israel." Jezebel's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. "A prophet," she repeated thoughtfully. "How interesting." She looked directly at Elijah then. The prophet met her gaze without flinching. It was a moment of recognition. Two people who somehow knew they would be opposed to each other, though the full story hadn't played out yet. Then Elijah turned and walked out of the throne room, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The formal reception continued, but something had changed. The celebratory mood had been broken. People whispered among themselves. What did the prophet's words mean? Was there really going to be judgment? Jezebel seemed completely unbothered. She smiled at the officials who came to pay their respects. She accepted gifts from the nobles. She asked intelligent questions about Samaria, about Israel's tribes, about the palace household. To everyone watching, she looked perfectly comfortable, perfectly in control. The wedding ceremony took place a week later. It was a grand affair, combining customs from both kingdoms. Israelite priests participated, and so did the Phoenician priests Jezebel had brought with her. People noticed that. 2 different sets of priests, 2 different types of blessings, 2 different names invoked. After the wedding, things began to change in Samaria. Ahab ordered a special throne to be built and placed next to his own. This wasn't just a seat, it was a statement. Jezebel wasn't going to be a decorative queen who sat quietly during audiences. She was going to rule beside her husband, and rule she did. Within months, Jezebel had established herself as a real power in the kingdom. She attended council meetings. She received ambassadors. She had opinions on policy, and Ahab listened to those opinions. She was generous too, which helped win people over. She distributed gifts to the women of the court, fine fabrics, perfumes, jewelry from Sidon. She hosted elaborate banquets. She brought a sophistication to Samaria that it hadn't had before. But while she was winning over the nobility, she was also quietly working on something else. She spoke to Ahab in private about the importance of honoring all gods, not just one. In Sidon, she would say, we acknowledge many divine powers. This brings blessing from all directions. Why limit yourself to just one God when you could have the favor of many? She talked about Baal as the god of storms and rain. He brings fertility to the land, she explained. Farmers need rain, crops need water. Why not honor the God who provides these things? She described Asherah as the mother goddess, protector of homes and families. Don't you want your people's households to be blessed? Don't you want women to bear healthy children and families to prosper? Ahab listened, and slowly he began to agree. He authorized the construction of an altar to Baal in Samaria, not in some hidden place, but in the main square, where everyone could see it. It was built from beautiful carved stone, impressive and imposing. Then he allowed a sacred pole for Asherah to be erected. These were wooden poles, often decorated with carvings that represented the goddess. They were placed in prominent locations throughout the city. Jezebel was pleased with these developments, but she didn't stop there. She began hosting religious ceremonies at these new altars. The rituals were colorful, dramatic, nothing like the simpler worship of Yahweh that most Israelites were used to. There was music, drums and cymbals and flutes, creating hypnotic rhythms. There was dancing, priests and priestesses moving in patterns that were both beautiful and slightly disturbing. There was incense, thick clouds of it that seemed to alter the very air. And there were sacrifices, not just grain and wine, but animals, slaughtered with great ceremony while the crowd watched. At first, most Israelites stayed away, but gradually, curiosity drew them closer. They would stand at the edges of the ceremonies, watching. Then they'd move a little closer. Then they'd begin to participate. Jezebel was brilliant at this. She didn't force anyone. She didn't threaten. She simply made her worship attractive, appealing, irresistible. She promised things too. Honor Baal, and your fields will produce abundant crops, she declared. Bring offerings to Asherah, and your wives will bear strong sons. In a time when life was hard and uncertain, when droughts could mean starvation and sickness could wipe out families, these promises were powerful. More and more people began attending the ceremonies. More and more families set up small images of Baal or Asherah in their homes. More and more Israelites began to say, why not honor these gods along with Yahweh? Why not get blessings from every possible source? The prophets watched all this with growing alarm. They saw how quickly people were turning away from pure worship of Yahweh toward this mixed devotion that included foreign gods. They spoke out against it, but their voices seemed small compared to the spectacle and promises of Jezebel's worship. And Elijah, that prophet who had confronted Ahab on the day Jezebel arrived, watched from a distance. He traveled through Israel's villages and towns, seeing the altars to Baal appearing everywhere. He saw families turning away from the faith of their ancestors toward these foreign gods. And he prayed. He prayed for Israel. He prayed for wisdom. He prayed for the right moment to act. Because he knew, with absolute certainty, that this couldn't continue forever. That Yahweh wouldn't allow his people to be led astray without consequence. That judgment was coming, even if no one else saw it yet. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the real conflict was about to begin. But that's a story for the next chapter. For now, take a breath. Notice how you're feeling. Is your mind calm? Is your body relaxed? Good. That's exactly where we want to be. If this story is helping you unwind, why not leave a comment below? I'd love to know what you think of Jezebel so far. Is she a villain, a victim, something more complex? Share your thoughts. Now, let's move into the next part of our journey, where the sky itself becomes part of the story. Chapter 5. When the sky closed. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if the rain just stopped? Not for a day or a week, but for months, for years. If you looked at the sky and saw nothing but endless blue, day after day, until you almost forgot what clouds looked like. That's what we're about to witness. Everything seemed to be going well for Jezebel. Her influence in Samaria was growing. The altars to Baal and Asherah were established. More and more people were participating in her rituals. Even the king himself regularly attended ceremonies honoring the Phoenician gods. The prophets who spoke against this were increasingly ignored. What harm was there, people reasoned, in honoring multiple gods? Wasn't it better to have more divine favor rather than less? Jezebel must have felt confident. Her plan was working. Israel was being transformed into a place where Baal could be worshipped just as openly as he was in Sidon. She was succeeding at exactly what her father had hoped, extending Phoenician influence deep into a neighboring kingdom. But there was one prophet who hadn't given up, one voice that refused to be silenced or ignored. Elijah. One day, without warning or announcement, Elijah appeared at the palace. He walked right past the guards, through the corridors, and into the throne room where Ahab was conducting business. The king looked up, surprised and annoyed. "What do you want, Elijah?" The prophet stepped forward. His voice was steady and clear. "As Yahweh lives, the God of Israel before whom I stand, there will be neither dew nor rain in the coming years except at my word." Then, before Ahab could respond, before guards could seize him, Elijah turned and left. It was such a brief encounter, maybe 30 seconds, a few words spoken, and then the prophet was gone. Ahab almost laughed. It seemed ridiculous. One man claiming he could control the weather, declaring that rain wouldn't fall unless he said so. It was absurd. When Jezebel heard about it, she dismissed it entirely. "Empty threats," she said. "Let him rant. Baal is the god of storms. If rain is needed, Baal will provide it." But weeks passed, and something strange began to happen. No rain fell. At first, no one was too concerned. Dry spells weren't unusual. Rain would come eventually. It always did. But the dry spell continued. 1 month, 2 months, 3. The morning dew that usually covered the grass and left droplets on leaves, that stopped too, just as Elijah had said. The ground stayed dry through the night. Nothing moistened the earth. Farmers started to worry. Crops needed water. The wheat and barley in the fields began to wither. Grapevines started drooping. The leaves on olive trees turned brown at the edges. Jezebel wasn't worried yet. She organized a special ceremony for Baal. After all, wasn't he the storm god? The one who supposedly brought rain? The ceremony was elaborate. All 450 prophets of Baal gathered at the main altar. They danced, they chanted, they made offerings. They called out to Baal from morning until evening. "Hear us, O Baal, send rain on the land." But the sky stayed clear. Not a single cloud appeared. 6 months passed. A year. Now people were really worried. The cisterns that collected rainwater were running dry. Wells that had never failed before were getting lower and lower. Streams were becoming trickles. The crops failed. The harvest that year was terrible. Food prices began to rise. Jezebel organized more ceremonies, bigger sacrifices, longer rituals. She herself, dressed in her finest robes, stood before Baal's altar with her arms raised to the sky. "Great Baal, Lord of storms, Master of the heavens, we honor you, we serve you. Send your rain upon your people." The sky remained empty. 1 year became 2, 2 became 3. Israel was in crisis now. Famine was spreading. Animals were dying because there was no grass to eat and no water to drink. People were leaving their homes, searching for any place that might have food or water. The king sent expeditions to find springs or wells that still had water. The palace itself had to ration supplies. Even the wealthy were struggling. And throughout all of this, the altars to Baal stood silent. The promises that Jezebel had made, that Baal would bring prosperity, that honoring him would ensure abundant harvests, those promises seemed hollow now. People began to whisper. They remembered Elijah's words. They remembered that the drought had begun exactly when the prophet said it would. Some began to wonder, was this a judgment? Was Yahweh, the God of Israel, showing that he was more powerful than Baal? Was the drought a response to Israel's turning away from their ancestral faith? Jezebel refused to consider this possibility. "Baal will answer," she insisted. "We must be more devoted, more faithful. We must offer more sacrifices." But what could they sacrifice when animals were dying and food was scarce? 3.5 years. That's how long the drought lasted. 3.5 years without rain, without even morning dew. The land became dust. Plants died. Animals died. And some people died too, from hunger and thirst. It was one of the worst crises Israel had ever faced. And here's something to think about. Who was really being tested during this drought? Was it just Israel? Or was it also Jezebel and her gods? She had come to Israel promising that Baal would bring blessings. She had built his altars and organized his worship. She had convinced people to honor him. And now, when they needed rain most desperately, when they called out to him with every ritual they knew, Baal was silent. The sky stayed closed. The storm god couldn't bring storms. The supposed master of rain couldn't produce a single drop of water. Meanwhile, Elijah had disappeared. No one knew where he was. Ahab had sent soldiers to search for him, but the prophet had vanished completely, which meant no one could ask him to end the drought. No one could beg him to speak the word that would open the heavens again. Israel was trapped in a disaster of its own making, and there seemed to be no way out. Jezebel's response to this crisis revealed a lot about her character. Instead of questioning her beliefs or considering that maybe, just maybe, she had led Israel down the wrong path, she became more stubborn, more determined, more convinced that she was right. she began to see the prophets of Yahweh as enemies who needed to be eliminated. They're undermining faith in Baal, she argued. They're the reason the people doubt. If they were gone, faith would be stronger, and Baal would surely answer. It was twisted logic, but Ahab, desperate and worn down by the endless crisis, allowed it. Jezebel began a persecution. She sent soldiers to find prophets of Yahweh and kill them. Not all succeeded. A man named Obadiah, who was in charge of Ahab's palace, secretly hid 100 prophets in caves and provided them with food and water. But many prophets were killed. It was a dark time, a time of drought and death, of fear and persecution, and still the sky stayed closed. But this couldn't last forever. Something had to break. Either Israel would collapse completely, or something dramatic would have to happen. And it did happen, in a way that no one expected, on a mountain that would become famous in Israel's history. But that's where our next chapter begins. Take a deep breath. Let your mind rest for a moment on what we've just heard. A land without rain. A queen who wouldn't admit she was wrong. A people caught between different gods and different prophets. What do you think will happen next? Keep that question in your mind as we move forward into what might be the most dramatic chapter of all. Chapter 6. The day fire fell from heaven. There are moments in history that change everything. Moments so dramatic, so unexpected, so powerful that everyone who witnesses them knows they're seeing something that will be talked about for generations. What we're about to experience is one of those moments. After 3.5 years of drought, Elijah reappeared. He went to Ahab with a message. Gather all Israel at Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. It's time to settle this question once and for all. Ahab, desperate for any solution to the drought, agreed. He sent messengers throughout Israel. Everyone was to come to Mount Carmel. This would be a public demonstration, a showdown between the prophets of Baal and the prophet of Yahweh. Imagine that gathering. Thousands of people climbing the mountain, hungry, thirsty, worn out from years of drought. They came from every part of Israel. Farmers and shepherds, merchants and craftsmen, nobles and commoners, all of them asking the same question. Would this finally end the drought? The prophets of Baal arrived in their ceremonial robes, 450 of them, the best and most experienced priests Jezebel had. They brought their ritual instruments, their sacred objects, everything they needed for a powerful ceremony. And Elijah stood alone. One man against 450. One prophet against an entire religious establishment. When everyone had gathered, Elijah stepped forward. His voice carried across the crowd. How long will you waver between two opinions? If Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The people said nothing. They wanted to see what would happen before they committed to either side. Elijah continued, I am the only prophet of Yahweh left, but Baal has 450 prophets here. Let's make a test. Bring 2 bulls. Let Baal's prophets prepare one, and I'll prepare the other. We'll put them on wood, but we won't light the fire. Then we'll call on our gods. The God who answers with fire, he is the true God. Everyone agreed this was fair. It was a clear test. Either Baal would show his power, or Yahweh would. The prophets of Baal went first. They prepared their bull, cut it up, and laid it on the wood. Then they began their ceremony. From morning until noon, they danced around the altar. They chanted. They called out, "Baal, answer us. Baal, hear us. Send your fire." Nothing happened. The crowd watched, waiting. The prophets danced harder. They chanted louder. They worked themselves into a frenzy of devotion. Still nothing. At noon, Elijah called out to them, his voice full of sarcasm. "Shout louder. Maybe Baal is thinking about something else. Maybe he's busy with some task. Maybe he's traveling. Maybe he's asleep and needs to be awakened." The prophets of Baal became desperate. They shouted at the tops of their voices. They began cutting themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until blood flowed. This was supposed to show their devotion, to get their God's attention. They kept this up for hours, from noon until the time of the evening sacrifice, dancing, shouting, bleeding, calling out to Baal. But there was no response. No voice answered. No fire came. The altar sat cold and silent. Finally, they collapsed from exhaustion. It was over. Baal had not answered. Then Elijah called to the people, "Come here to me." The crowd moved closer, pressing in to see what would happen next. Elijah found 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. He rebuilt an old altar to Yahweh that had been torn down. He dug a trench around it. He arranged the wood carefully and prepared the sacrifice. Then he did something that seemed crazy. He ordered 4 large jars to be filled with water, precious water, during a drought, and poured over the sacrifice and the wood. "Do it again," he said. They poured 4 more jars. A third time, he commanded. 4 more jars of water drenched everything. The water ran all over the altar and filled the trench. Everything was soaked. There was no way fire could naturally start now. Then Elijah stepped forward. He didn't dance. He didn't shout. He didn't cut himself. He simply prayed in a clear, calm voice. "Yahweh, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Answer me, Yahweh, answer me, so these people will know that you, Yahweh, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back to you." The moment he finished speaking, fire fell from the sky. Not a small flame, not a spark that gradually grew. Fire fell from heaven like lightning, but it didn't just strike the altar, it consumed everything. The sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust. It even licked up the water in the trench. The crowd fell on their faces, crying out, "Yahweh is God! Yahweh is God!" It was undeniable, unmistakable. After hours of Baal's prophets getting no response, Yahweh had answered immediately and dramatically. One prayer, and fire from heaven. One moment, and everything changed. Can you imagine being there, seeing that fire fall, feeling the heat of it, hearing the roar of it, smelling the smoke, knowing, absolutely knowing, that you'd just witnessed something supernatural? But Elijah wasn't finished. He had the prophets of Baal seized, all 450 of them. They were taken down to the Kishon Valley, and there, Elijah had them executed. It was harsh judgment, but in Israel's law, prophets who led people to worship false gods were supposed to be put to death. Then Elijah turned to Ahab. "Go, eat and drink, because there's the sound of heavy rain." Ahab couldn't hear any rain. The sky was still clear, but he went back to his tent. Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel. He bent down to the ground, putting his face between his knees, and began to pray. He sent his servant to look toward the sea. "There's nothing there," the servant reported. "Go back," Elijah said. 7 times Elijah sent him to look, and on the 7th time the servant said, "I see a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." Elijah jumped up. "Go tell Ahab to hurry to his chariot and go down the mountain before the rain stops him." Within minutes, the sky grew black with clouds. Wind picked up, and then the rain came. Not a gentle shower, a heavy downpour. Rain that had been held back for 3.5 years falling all at once. The people stood in it, letting it soak them, laughing and crying at the same time. Children danced in puddles. Adults lifted their faces to the sky. The drought was over, and Ahab, soaked to the skin, rode his chariot back to the palace in Jezreel as fast as the horses could run. When he arrived at the palace, he found Jezebel waiting. She could see from his face that something significant had happened. "What news?" she demanded, and Ahab told her everything: the confrontation on Mount Carmel, the prophets of Baal failing for hours, Elijah's prayer, the fire from heaven, the execution of her 450 prophets, the rain. As he spoke, Jezebel's face changed, not with humility or reconsideration, with rage. All her prophets dead. Baal humiliated in front of the entire nation. Her religious influence shattered in a single day. Everything she'd worked for, undone. When Ahab finished speaking, Jezebel said nothing for a long moment. Then, in a cold, hard voice, she called for a messenger. "Go find Elijah," she commanded. "Give him this message. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I don't make his life like that of my prophets." It was a death threat, clear and direct. She was going to kill Elijah, and she wanted him to know it was coming. When Elijah received that message, he did something that might surprise you. This man who had just called down fire from heaven, who had confronted 450 prophets alone, who had ended a 3-year drought, this man ran away. He was afraid. He fled south, all the way to the wilderness, collapsing under a broom tree and praying that he might die. Why? How could someone who had been so strong suddenly be so weak? Maybe because he realized that while he'd won the confrontation, nothing fundamental had changed in Jezebel's heart. She wasn't turning to Yahweh. She wasn't admitting she'd been wrong. She was just angry and determined to get revenge. It's a fascinating moment. The great prophet, who had stood firm for so long, finally reaching his breaking point. But that's a complexity for you to think about. Sometimes the people who seem strongest have their weak moments too. Sometimes victory doesn't feel like we expect it to. The story continues, but we'll pause here for now. Your mind has traveled through one of the most dramatic moments in ancient history. Take a breath. Let it settle. If you're still listening, still engaged with this story, would you hit the subscribe button? These journeys through history take a lot of research and preparation, and your subscription helps make more of them possible. Now, as your mind continues to relax, as your body sinks deeper into rest, let's move forward to the next chapter, where we'll see what happens when a queen's power meets human greed. Chapter 7. The vineyard that cost everything. Sometimes the biggest revelations of character come in small moments. Not in grand confrontations or dramatic showdowns, but in simple situations that reveal what someone truly values. This chapter is about one of those moments. After the confrontation on Mount Carmel, life in Israel slowly returned to normal. The rain had come back, crops were growing again. The immediate crisis was over. But the spiritual crisis wasn't resolved. Jezebel was still queen. The worship of Baal and Asherah continued, though perhaps less openly after the dramatic demonstration of Yahweh's power. And Ahab, influenced by his wife, continued to make decisions that showed where his true loyalties lay. One day, Ahab was walking near his palace in Jezreel when he noticed a beautiful vineyard. The vines were healthy, the grapes plump and sweet. It was well maintained and obviously the pride of its owner. The vineyard belonged to a man named Naboth. It had been in his family for generations, passed down from father to son, carefully tended, a source of both income and pride. Ahab had an idea. That vineyard was so close to his palace. If he owned it, he could turn it into a vegetable garden. It would be convenient, useful, perfect for the royal household. So he approached Naboth with what seemed like a reasonable offer. "Give me your vineyard so I can make it into a vegetable garden, since it's so close to my palace. I'll give you a better vineyard in exchange. Or if you prefer, I'll pay you whatever it's worth." It seemed fair. A king making a legitimate purchase from a subject. Naboth could get land in a different location, or money, or both. But Naboth shook his head firmly. "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." This wasn't just about economic value for Naboth. According to Israelite law and tradition, family land was sacred. It represented your ancestors, your heritage, your place in the community. Selling it, especially to someone outside the family, wasn't just a business transaction. It was abandoning your identity. Naboth couldn't, in good conscience, sell the land his fathers had left him. Ahab should have understood this. As king of Israel, he should have respected the laws and customs of his own people. He should have accepted Naboth's answer and moved on, but he didn't. Instead, he went back to his palace, went to his bedroom, lay down on his bed, turned his face to the wall, and refused to eat. He sulked like a child who'd been told he couldn't have a toy. This is interesting, isn't it? Here was the king of Israel, with wealth and power, with a palace and armies, with everything most people could dream of. But because one man wouldn't sell him one vineyard, he threw what was essentially a tantrum. Jezebel found him like this. "Why are you so sullen?" she asked. "Why won't you eat?" Ahab explained about Naboth's refusal. Jezebel's response reveals everything about her character. She looked at her sulking husband with something like contempt. "Is this how you act as king over Israel?" she asked. "Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth." Notice what she didn't say. She didn't say, "Respect his decision," or "His reasons are valid," or "We should find another solution." She saw Naboth's refusal as an obstacle to be eliminated, not a right to be respected. And eliminate it she did, in the most ruthless way imaginable. Jezebel wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal. She sent them to the elders and nobles of Naboth's city with instructions. Proclaim a day of fasting. Give Naboth a place of honor, but seat 2 scoundrels opposite him to accuse him of cursing both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death. It was a carefully designed murder dressed up as legal execution. A false charge, false witnesses, and a predetermined outcome. And it worked. The elders did exactly what Jezebel commanded. Naboth was falsely accused, taken outside the city, and stoned to death. His sons were killed too, to eliminate any heirs who might claim the vineyard. Then the message came back to Jezebel. Naboth is dead. She went to Ahab with a smile. Get up and take possession of the vineyard Naboth refused to sell you. He's no longer alive, but dead. Ahab didn't ask how it happened. He didn't question the circumstances. He simply got up and went down to the vineyard to claim it as his own. He walked among the vines that Naboth had tended so carefully. He probably imagined where he'd plant his vegetables, how he'd arrange his garden. He was getting what he wanted. But then a familiar figure appeared among the rows of grapevines. Elijah. The prophet walked toward Ahab, and the king's face fell. So you have found me, my enemy. I have found you, Elijah replied, because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Then the prophet delivered one of the most terrible pronouncements in all of Scripture. In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood. Yes, yours. I'm going to bring disaster on you. I'll sweep away your descendants. And as for Jezebel, dogs will devour her by the wall of Jezreel. The judgment was comprehensive and specific, not just punishment for Ahab, but for his entire house, and special mention of Jezebel, the one who had orchestrated this murder. Here's what makes this moment so significant. It was a test of what Ahab and Jezebel truly valued. When faced with a simple no from one of their subjects, would they respect the law and traditions of Israel? Or would they use their power to take what they wanted regardless of right and wrong? They failed that test spectacularly. For a vegetable garden, something trivial, unnecessary, purely a matter of convenience, they committed murder. It revealed that beneath all the religious debates about Yahweh versus Baal, beneath all the grand confrontations and dramatic moments, there was a fundamental moral corruption. A belief that power gave them the right to do whatever they wanted, to whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted. And here's something worth thinking about. Jezebel probably thought she was being a good wife. She saw her husband upset, and she solved his problem. In her worldview, this might have seemed like loyalty and competence, but it was actually evil. It was taking innocent life for the sake of convenience. It was showing complete disregard for justice and law. Sometimes our cultural background can blind us to basic morality. Jezebel came from a place where kings were also priests, where the rules could be bent if you had enough power. She brought that worldview to Israel and applied it without considering that Israel had different values, different laws, different standards. Or maybe she knew and didn't care. Maybe she thought her way was better. Maybe she believed that power should have no limits. Either way, the result was the same. An innocent man dead, a family destroyed, and a judgment pronounced that would eventually come true in terrible detail. Interestingly, when Ahab heard Elijah's pronouncement, he did something unexpected. He tore his clothes, put on rough sackcloth, fasted, and walked around humbly. It was genuine repentance, or at least genuine fear, and because of it, God showed mercy. The full judgment wouldn't come during Ahab's lifetime, but in the days of his sons. But there's no record of Jezebel repenting. When she heard what Elijah had said about her fate, she apparently dismissed it, just as she had dismissed his earlier pronouncements. She didn't believe the prophet's words would come true. Or maybe she believed her gods would protect her. Or maybe she simply couldn't imagine a world where she didn't win in the end. But those words were spoken. Dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. The judgment was set. All that remained was for time to bring it to pass. Take a moment here. We're moving toward the conclusion of our story. The pieces are all in place. The words have been spoken. Now we just need to see how it all unfolds. If this story has made you think, if it's raised questions about power and morality and the consequences of our choices, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I read them all, and I love hearing your perspectives. Now let's move into our final chapter, where we'll see how all these prophecies, all these warnings, all these choices finally come to their conclusion. Chapter 8. When Words Come True. There's something both terrifying and reassuring about the idea that words have power, that what's spoken will eventually come to pass, that justice, even if delayed, will eventually arrive. This final chapter is about that, about the fulfillment of everything that was promised, warned, and prophesied. Some time after the incident with Naboth's vineyard, war came again to Israel. Syria, their longtime enemy, was attacking, and Ahab decided to lead his army in defense. Before leaving for battle, Ahab consulted prophets about the outcome. Most of them said what he wanted to hear. Go and be victorious. The Lord will give you success. But one prophet, Micaiah, said something different. I saw all Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd. You will not return from this battle. Ahab didn't want to believe it. He even tried to trick fate by disguising himself as an ordinary soldier, while his ally, the king of Judah, wore royal robes. If the enemy was looking for the king, they'd target the wrong person. It was a clever plan, but it didn't work. In the chaos of battle, a Syrian soldier drew his bow and shot an arrow at random. It wasn't aimed at anyone in particular. Just a shot into the crowded battlefield, but that random arrow found its way through the joints of Ahab's armor and struck him deeply in the side. Mortally wounded, Ahab propped himself up in his chariot and watched the battle continue until evening. Then, as the sun was setting, he died. His body was brought back to Samaria for burial. His chariot, stained with his blood, was taken to be washed by the pool. And there, just as Elijah had said years earlier, dogs came and licked up the king's blood. The first part of the prophecy was fulfilled exactly. Ahab's death left the throne to his sons, first Ahaziah, then Joram. Both of them, influenced by their mother Jezebel, continued in the same patterns of idolatry that their father had established. Jezebel was still a power in the kingdom, still advising, still promoting the worship of Baal, still hostile to the prophets of Yahweh. She must have thought she'd won. After all, she'd outlived Elijah. He'd been taken to heaven in a whirlwind. Her sons sat on the throne. Her influence continued. The altars to Baal still stood in Samaria. But God's words, spoken so long ago, hadn't been forgotten. During the reign of Joram, God raised up a prophet named Elisha, Elijah's successor. And Elisha had a mission. He sent one of the prophets to find a commander in Israel's army named Jehu. This commander was anointed as the next king with specific instructions: destroy the house of Ahab and eliminate the worship of Baal from Israel. Jehu took his mission seriously. With the fervor of divine appointment driving him, he set out immediately for Jezreel, where King Joram was recovering from battle wounds. Jehu didn't come slowly or secretly. He came at full speed, his chariot racing along the road, dust flying behind him. Lookouts on the walls of Jezreel saw him coming and reported to the king. Joram, not knowing what was happening, went out in his chariot to meet Jehu. "Is it peace, Jehu?" Joram called out. Jehu's answer was sharp and damning. "How can there be peace as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" In that moment, Joram understood. This wasn't a meeting, it was an execution. He tried to flee, but Jehu drew his bow and shot an arrow that pierced Joram's heart. The king collapsed in his chariot, dead. Jehu ordered the body thrown into the field of Naboth. "Remember," he said to his officer, "what the Lord said about Ahab. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, I will repay you for the blood of Naboth." This is the fulfillment of that word. Then Jehu continued toward Jezreel, where Jezebel waited. When Jezebel heard that Jehu was coming, she knew what it meant. She'd just received word that her son was dead. She knew Jehu had been anointed to destroy her family. She knew judgment was coming. And here's what's fascinating. She decided to face it with pride intact. Jezebel painted her eyes with kohl. She arranged her hair carefully. She put on her jewelry and her finest clothes. She prepared herself as a queen, determined that even in death, she would look like royalty. Then she went to the window of the palace and looked down at the courtyard, waiting for Jehu to arrive. When his chariot rolled through the gates, she called out mockingly, "Have you come in peace, you Zimri, you murderer of your master?" She was comparing him to an earlier usurper in Israel's history, trying to shame him, to show that she wasn't afraid. Jehu looked up at that window. He didn't respond to Jezebel. Instead, he called out loudly, "Who is on my side? Who?" Several officials appeared at the windows above. "Throw her down," Jehu commanded. For a moment, nothing happened. These were men who had served under Jezebel, who had perhaps feared her for years. Could they really do this? But then hands reached out, seized the queen, and threw her from the window. Jezebel fell, her body hitting the palace wall and then the ground. Her blood splattered on the walls and on the horses as Jehu's chariot drove over her body. It was brutal. It was horrifying. It was the end of a woman who had wielded enormous power for decades. Jehu went inside the palace to eat and drink. After some time had passed, he seemed to remember that despite everything, Jezebel had been a king's daughter. "See to that cursed woman," he said. "Bury her, for she was a king's daughter." But when the servants went to retrieve her body, they found almost nothing. In just that short time, the dogs of Jezreel had come and devoured her flesh. Only her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands remained. When they reported this to Jehu, he nodded slowly. This is the word of Yahweh that he spoke through Elijah. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. Her body will be like dung on the ground, so that no one will be able to say, "This is Jezebel." The prophecy spoken so many years earlier had come true in exact detail. The dogs had devoured her. By the wall of Jezreel, her body was left like refuse, unrecognizable, dishonored. It's a grim ending, isn't it? No peaceful death surrounded by family, no honored burial, no memorial, just a violent end and a body consumed by dogs. Why does this story end this way? What are we supposed to take from it? Maybe it's this, that choices have consequences, that power used wrongly doesn't protect you forever, that justice, even when it's delayed, eventually comes. Jezebel had opportunities to change. When Elijah called down fire from heaven, she could have reconsidered her devotion to Baal. When her prophets were proven powerless, she could have humbled herself. When Elijah pronounced judgment, she could have repented as her husband briefly did, but she didn't. She remained convinced that she was right, that her gods would protect her, that her power would last forever. And in the end, all that power, all that confidence, all that pride meant nothing. The words spoken by a rough prophet dressed in camel hair came true, while the promises of priests in fine robes came to nothing. Here's a question to think about as we close. Was Jezebel evil, or was she just a product of her culture, doing what she thought was right? Was she a villain, or a tragic figure who genuinely believed she was serving her gods and supporting her husband? Maybe she was both. Maybe she had qualities we could admire: intelligence, confidence, determination, but directed them toward wrong ends. Maybe she was capable of love and loyalty, but expressed it in destructive ways. History tends to paint people as simply good or evil, but real people are usually more complex than that. What we can say for certain is that Jezebel's story is a warning about the danger of pride, about the importance of being willing to question your beliefs when evidence contradicts them, about how power can corrupt even people who think they're doing right, and about how words, especially words spoken by those who genuinely speak for God, have a power that outlasts armies, outlasts kingdoms, outlasts even the people who tried to silence them. The rain that Elijah called came. The fire that he called down fell. The judgments that he pronounced came to pass. His words proved true. Jezebel's words, her promises, her assurances that Baal would protect and provide, they proved empty. In the end, that's what the story comes down to. Not just the fall of a queen, but the vindication of truth over falsehood, of the real God over false ones, of justice over power. And with that, our journey through this ancient story comes to an end. You've traveled with me across centuries, through palaces and temples, through drought and rain, through confrontations and consequences. You've met a priest king and his ambitious daughter, a weak king and a powerful queen, prophets who spoke boldly despite the cost. And you've witnessed how their choices shaped nations and echoed through history. I hope this story has given you something to think about, something to ponder as you drift off to sleep or simply relax. Questions about power and faith, about pride and humility, about how our choices ripple outward in ways we can't always predict. Thank you for taking this journey with me. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who might appreciate these historical journeys. Sleep well, my friend, and may your own story be one of wisdom, humility, and choices that lead to life rather than destruction. Until next time, rest peacefully. Good night.